Good afternoon, Conference. The first debate is term time family holiday rules. And can I call on Karen Wilkinson to propose, and can I ask Councillor Charlotte Barnes to stand by? Thank you.
Good afternoon, Conference. First time speaker, please be nice to me. Thank you. Conference, before September 2013, head teachers had the discretion to allow up to 10 days absence in an academic year in special circumstances, including family holidays, and additional absence in exceptional circumstances. According to government statistics at the time, this discretion led to 0.1% of recorded school sessions being missed for reasons of authorised family holiday. In 2013, on the basis of a single sentence in an anecdotal report by an advisor, Michael Gove brought in a regulation which removed family holidays from head teachers' discretion and changed special circumstances to exceptional circumstances for other absence. The result, in the words of a government spokesman, is that taking children out of school without permission for a holiday is a criminal offence. And when doing so, parents are risking prosecution, financial penalties, and a criminal record. Clearly not a liberal approach to life. Supporters of the government's line say there is no better place for a child to be than in school during the term. But actually, Conference, not only is life more complicated than this, the ban on term time holidays utterly ignores and is even contrary to the findings of the government's research on this issue. So what is the evidence for this policy? Well, after Michael Gove attributed the Tottenham riots to an educational underclass, he asked his expert advisor on behaviour for a report on attendance. That advisor was Charlie Taylor, an ex-head teacher and old Etonian contemporary of David Cameron. In Taylor's 2012 report, it contains no references. He talked to some colleagues, but not apparently to any pupils or parents. I will quote in full his evidence for his recommendation that term time holiday regulations are strengthened. It reads, "Some parents and schools interpret this, the existing rules, as an automatic entitlement to an annual 2-week term time holiday." And that's it. Some parents and schools. No stats, no analysis, just some parents and schools. Oddly, Mr. Taylor appears to have overlooked or misread a piece of the government's own research on attendance in 2011. That report shows an undeniable link between attendance and attainment of some nature. But when researchers drilled down into the figures a little, their findings were, and again I quote, "The likelihood of pupils achieving the expected Key Stage 2 level not only differ greatly by the amount of absences accrued, but also by the different reasons behind these absences. The proportion of pupils achieving the expected level stay relatively similar for increasing levels of absence due to authorised family holidays, religious observance and study leave." At Key Stage 2, actually, their charts show a slightly positive link between attainment and authorised family holiday absences of up to about 4%. But why this clear evidence of no detrimental link for authorised absence for family holidays and religious observance has been ignored remains a mystery. The report's findings were borne out by a head teacher in Reading who wrote to a newspaper that in his school, children who went on family holidays in term time outperformed those who did not. Now, why that should be remains to be investigated. But in any event, we are left in the situation where a modern British government has criminalised some of its citizens on the basis of the phrase "some parents and schools," even though its own evidence did not justify the policy. So, Conference, I ask, is it right that on this evidence the Haymores were prosecuted for taking their children to their grandfather's memorial service? Is it right that Stuart Sutherland was fined £1,000 and criminalised for going on holiday at the only time his employer permitted? Is it right that 13-year-old Miss A was refused permission to spend a week with her grandmother before an operation which could have left her wheelchair-bound for the rest of her life? I don't think so. And is it right that the phrase "some parents" has led to over 16,000 being prosecuted, that young carers are being denied respite, children with disabilities have been discriminated against, and that farmers, bus drivers and paramedics, to name but a few, are being denied quantity and quality family time together because they can't choose when to take their holidays? I don't think so. And is it right that Devon and Cornwall lost £87 million from their economy and small tourism businesses around the country are going bust due to the Gove effect? I don't think so. The children who need help most are persistent absentees who are less likely than their high-retaining peers to go on family holidays. So is it right that attendance officers are being distracted from helping these children by these ridiculous cases we're seeing? I don't think so. It's no surprise that it's not just parents who don't like this regulation. The NUT, the Police Federation, the tourism industry, magistrates, the local government association, educational professionals and academics, and Liberty have all expressed concern. The current regulation is deeply offensive to the vast majority of parents who don't make the decision lightly to take their children out of school, but weigh up real-life experience, family well-being and health, as well as academic attainment. As Tim Farron said in the Daily Mail when he backed this motion, it is a fundamental liberal principle of individual choice for parents to spend time with their children. But what we have here is a government which has forgone a collaborative approach to educating our children in favour of the bully stance of "do as I say or I will hurt you." It is time government understood that parents and pupils are the user group of our education service. Life is complicated, and if we are to succeed in equipping our young people for a complex future, our education service needs to understand and work with the needs of its user group to evolve the most efficient delivery model it can. To do that, it has to start listening to parents properly and not continue this relentless disengagement of parents from the education system. Conference, the current regulation is leading to gross injustice, is driving a wedge between parents and schools, is socially divisive, it doesn't apply to private school families, and has absolutely no meaningful evidence base. This motion does not ask for a free-for-all in attendance, just to return to the situation prior to September 2013, where head teachers could exercise greater discretion. I urge Conference to support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karen. Can I call Councillor Charlotte Barnes and ask Hina Malik to stand by?
I hold my hands up. I am a very, very, very bad parent. I took my children out early this year after some of the most difficult months earlier on in the year for 2 days to take them on holiday. We had an amazing time. It was absolutely fantastic. I fully support this motion, but I'd like to speak about some of the reasons why people find it so difficult to stick to their holidays in term time currently. I live in a rural part of the world. Tourism for us is extremely important, and so is farming. There are families on very, very low incomes in the area that I represent. They can't afford to go away when prices are at their peak. We have families whose parents are dual nationality. I have one parent living in the area I represent who is American and her husband is English. Thanksgiving is an important celebration for her, but doesn't fit in with the UK school holiday timetable. We are often encouraged to remember our roots, but it seems some children will be denied this opportunity under the current scheme. Self-employed people don't get holiday pay and need to work when work comes in. This may not necessarily fit around the school holiday timetable. And as I mentioned, the farming community, lambing at Easter, harvesting in the summer, and the potato harvest in October doesn't leave much time for family holidays. Many farmers as well have had to diversify and set up B&Bs or converted barns to holiday lets to make ends meet. They are busiest in their holidays. Finally, but not exclusively, many rural areas run businesses that again rely on tourism. They have to work when the work is there. They cannot leave their business when it's super busy. It just doesn't make sense. We must support this motion and stop the current stifling rules that are preventing families the chance to enjoy time together. We can't blame the holiday companies. They're working on a supply and demand model. What we need to do is give people freedom and trust that they will do what is best for their families.
Can I call Hina Malik, who is a new member and a first-time speaker, and ask Steve Webb to stand by.
Good afternoon. It's my first time, so again, you have to bear with me if I make some mistakes when I'm speaking passionately about this. This is very close to my heart because I'm a mother of two. I'm also a teacher, and I'm a big advocate for women empowerment and youth empowerment. So I think the children should have a say before they would decide things like these. I just feel the children from the diverse background, they need to be part of the holidays for the extended families. They need to feel that joy. We celebrate the liberal values here for diversity and equality. So if you almost restricting the children for their, I would call it like social and economic barriers, because of those marginalized background which they can't afford, and the children should have access to the extended family so they can bring back those cultural values to this country, even in an education system where they teach about different communities, they can come and share those values with other peers. Now, I just feel that the government should look at either those impose penalties for those airlines who deliberately put their fares up in the holidays. That leads almost like a forced decision to those parents who can't afford very high prices, try to take a week before the term time ends. This is the pure reason why they would book holidays in that. Either they impose penalties on that or try to get the airlines to have a static fare during the holidays. I believe then the parents will not take those holidays in term time. But if they cannot do that, then they have to allow those families who have got this marginalized background, who should be part of their extended families, they should be allowed these holidays, maybe a couple of week term time should be allowed to them and not impose penalties. I strongly believe this is our ethos for the Liberals, for equality and diversity policy. Thank you.
Can I call Steve Webb, who was our excellent pensions minister in the coalition government, and ask Emily Stewart to stand by.
A quick run through the latest developments in pensions policy. Oh no, sorry, wrong. Old habits die hard. The reason I wanted to make a contribution to this debate was to support our excellent constituency chair, Karen Wilkinson, and the campaigning work she, John Hemming and others around the country have done on this issue. This is an issue of Michael Gove against liberalism. I could leave it there, really, couldn't I? But why is this so important? Because actually, in the last Parliament, I went with Karen to see an education minister who will remain nameless. And we made the case that this isn't about a blank cheque. This isn't, we of all parties, every other member of the Liberal Democrats is a retired teacher. Of all the parties, we get the value of education. This isn't anti-education. But what it is about choice and about treating people as adults. It's about letting parents and head teachers have a sensible conversation. And the answer won't always be yes, but it allows for that sensible conversation to happen. And it used to happen. And when we went to see this education minister, he was there with his officials, and they just trotted out, well, absences are bad for educational outcomes. And it was Karen who had to bring the evidence into the room and say, yes, truancy is bad for educational outcomes. But these kind of planned, carefully thought through times when it's necessary to fit with cultural differences, family commitments, and the response was, well, head teachers can still let people off in exceptional circumstances. But it hasn't worked. There have been too many scandalous cases where perfectly good reasons, heart-rending reasons for not being in school have been turned down by head teachers, and as a result they've been criminalised and penalised. That can't be right. Now, Karen has been brilliant. You turn on the telly, there she is, making the case. But what always saddened me was it didn't say Karen Wilkinson, Liberal Democrats. It said Karen Wilkinson, parents want to say, or whatever. And the reason it didn't say Liberal Democrats is because it's not the policy of our party. And I think we should be ashamed of that. Of all people, we should be in favour of treating people like adults, not Whitehall knows best, not Michael Gove on the basis of something somebody once said to somebody, but on the basis of the evidence. If we're in favour of choice, treating people as adults and not controlling things from the centre, but letting parents and schools work together, please support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Can I call Emily Stewart, who is a first-time speaker at the conference, and ask Alan Sherwell to stand by.
Good afternoon, conference. So I'm a new member, a first-time speaker, and a qualified teacher. And perhaps surprisingly, I'm going to speak against the motion because I believe that it is addressing the symptoms rather than the root causes of a problem. So firstly, I will state that I am not against children seizing opportunities, broadening their outlook and celebrating their successes. Because conference, as has previously been mentioned, this is not just about family holidays. This is the child who's been invited to give a speech, to receive an award, to compete in sport, to perform on stage. On the flip side, it's the young carer who has to stay at home this week because their parent is too ill to cope alone. We must not criminalise parents for any of these things. However, I am against this motion because I am against the additional burden which will be placed on teachers as a result. Because of this country's obsession with testing, if a child misses even 1 week of school, it is highly likely that they will have missed an assessment in one subject or another. And their teacher will have to chase that child. They will have to give up their time out of hours to catch up on that child's missed assessment and that child's missed learning. Not because this assessment is crucial to that child's progress and development, it's probably not, but because teachers are held accountable for these assessment results. Because teachers lose sleep and shed tears over targets, league tables and Ofsted. Because it doesn't look good on my spreadsheet if there's a gap. I have to explain that gap. I have to explain why that child missed an assessment. And it's at this point, conference, I have to tell you that actually I don't have to make those explanations anymore because I'm no longer a teacher. According to government figures, I am one of the almost 4 in 10 teachers who leave the profession within just 1 year of qualifying, partly because of a crushing workload which is simply not compatible with a normal, healthy or balanced life. The motion states that the Department for Education's evidence shows that these absences have no negative impact on students' attainment, but there is a negative impact on the teachers who work for those children. And what a damning indictment it is of our education system, a system so broken and so ineffective that it makes no difference to your child's attainment whether they turn up or not. So my dad would have said, who was a teacher for his entire life, you don't make a pig fatter by weighing it more often. So I ask you to vote against this motion and instead seek solutions to the real problems, the real underlying problems. So while on the surface this motion looks a bit niche, it looks like it's perhaps even a minor issue, I assure you that it is just the tip of a very ugly iceberg. So again, I urge you to vote against this motion and to let teachers teach. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Can I call Alan Sherwell and ask Sharan Youssef to stand by, please?
Thank you. I was very pleased to hear the last contribution because I thought this debate was getting into a situation where we were only hearing from one part of the various complex bits that make up our education system. I'm chair of governors of a two-form entry primary school. We try as hard as possible to work with parents to get the right solutions to these sorts of issues. including moving our inset day pattern so that people are able in the two most popular half terms to take a week off without actually having to travel on a weekend. So we're very sympathetic to this situation. But what frightens me in a school where the parents are not necessarily the most easy to connect with is a situation where the head is placed in a position of saying they have the choice, they have the right to choose whether that parent can go on holiday or whatever, on the one hand, but on the other hand, they're told by Ofsted that they have to have 95% attendance and that is going to be brought up to 100% attendance, which of course is impossible because children are ill, but that's a different story. So on the one hand, you've got the regime which says you have to have the children in school. On the other hand, you have the parents that quite often for perfectly reasonable reasons, sometimes not, but quite often for perfectly reasonable reasons, want to take their child out of school for that period. And the head is placed in the middle of a conflict which they have no reasonable answer to. And the points that the last speaker made about the system are what matters here. And I mean, somebody said to me that it's implied within this motion that the Ofsted setup has to change. Well, the motion's 34 lines long. It could have been rather more than implied. But without that change, it adds a real strain to people that have an immensely difficult job as it is. Now, I'm not going to mention any names, but I know there's somebody in the room at the moment that has a fair amount of influence with Ofsted, and I hope he will take back the message that we do need flexibility in this area, but the flexibility has to be from the top as well as from the bottom, so that head teachers are not put in a completely invidious position, but actually have the ability to decide on the merits of the case without worrying that some Ofsted inspector is going to come round 3 weeks later and say, "Very sorry, your attendance is crap, and that's one of the reasons why I'm going to say your school is crap." Thank you.
Can I call Saran Youssef and ask Councillor Sal Jarvis to stand by?
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you very much for calling me to speak on this topic. It's something I felt compelled to talk on because of the positive experiences of having holidays during term time as a child and the reason why we had to do it. I'm speaking for the motion, in particular line 17, parents who often have no say in when they can take a holiday. My father worked in a shift pattern which included night shifts, and his holiday was preset by his employer. I assume to ensure the shift pattern worked and possibly to ensure he had enough rest days. As a result, my dad had no say when he could take the holiday. So the best he could do was to swap shifts and rest days with other colleagues to get 2 weeks off. No one would want to swap with him over the summer. It didn't happen. So we couldn't go on holiday during the summer holidays. Our only option was to go away during term time. If we didn't, we may not have been able to go away at all and have family time together. And with a mother who worked late and a father who worked shifts, those few weeks together were absolutely precious to us. Moving on to the motion itself, schools today are far too target-driven and under pressure to achieve targets, including in attendance. But attending school doesn't necessarily equal being engaged. Likewise, a holiday does not always mean lying around on a beach. Children learn while they're away from school and on holiday too. Holidays can bring alive things you've already learnt, or you can learn new things and help learn things in the future. For example, my holidays during term time, which were mostly to France, they covered history, when we visited Les Somme and met a World War I veteran who told us all about his experience in the war. RE, we visited more churches than I ever did with school and learned religious customs in the regions. Languages, I had a decent knowledge of French before high school, which gave me a head start. And geography. I visited countries, stayed in mountainous areas, saw glaciers for myself, and also learned a little bit about farming. In addition, I met and made friends with so many different children from so many different countries and learnt about their cultures, how they did things, how we differed, and how we were similar. Some children never make it out of the area they were born in, and they never will if we don't allow their families to have holidays when it's more affordable and when parents are allowed to by their employer. It seems to me that if you want a more tolerant society, you need to give people the opportunity to travel and meet people from other cultures instead of just learning about it theoretically in the classroom. I'm sure that if my parents could always have taken us out of holiday during... I'm sure that if my parents could always have taken holiday during school holidays, they would have, but they couldn't, so they didn't. And if they had not have taken us away during school time, my sister and I would not have had these wonderful educational experiences and crucial family time, and we would have been all the poorer for it. So please vote for the motion.
Thank you very much. Calling Sal Jarvis, could I ask Neil Hughes to stand by, please?
Good afternoon, people. I can't really improve on Karen's authoritative arguments in favour of this motion, but I do want to add my voice to the arguments in support of it. I currently work in a university training teachers, and before that I was a primary school teacher and a special educational needs coordinator. No one could really believe more in the value of education than I do. So you might think that I ought to be here opposing this motion, but nothing could be further from the truth. Children currently spend around 6 hours a day in school in term time. What they learn out of school is at least as important as what they learn in school, and parents and carers are the guardians of that learning. As this motion says, there is no evidence that 2 weeks planned out of school lowers attainment. The term time rule is wrong for 3 reasons. Firstly, it impacts unfairly on poorer parents, as has already been said. The little boy who once told me proudly about his family's first ever holiday in Clapton in a caravan could no longer go because they could afford only a term time holiday. Secondly, it disempowers parents and runs counter to liberal principles of freedom and choice. Of course, we should be persuading parents of the value of education in school, but it should be persuasion, not legislation, which only damages head teachers' relationships with parents. And finally, the current rule is muddle-headed. You do not have to send your child to school at all. You can educate them at home or otherwise. No one will fine you. But if you take your child out of school for a fortnight, then you will be fined, for whatever reason you're taking them, no matter how valuable. I do want to add that while I sympathise hugely with the stress on teachers and head teachers, criminalising parents for taking their children out of school is the wrong solution to a much larger problem. Conference, please support this motion.
Can I call Neil Hughes, who wishes to speak against the motion, and ask Barbara Smith to stand by?
Thanks, Chair. Well, not a first-time speaker, but first time for 10 years, so it's nice to be back so rapidly. And I find myself also with a leader I actually voted for, but also that I'm speaking against something he's so recently promoted on this occasion, so perhaps I should apologise for that. I'm speaking against the motion, but can I say it's been a great debate even so far, and I only marginally disagree with those who are speaking for. But the issue is, even if the government listened to what the Liberal Democrats are saying here, let's say this motion were passed, it's not likely to make any difference, and we know that really. And also the difference between the situation if the motion were passed and it became the situation in the country, and if actually we stay as we are, is also not great, because as one speaker has already said, head teachers can already make exceptions. And my wife's a head teacher, and I know this can be made in some of the cases that have been described already. The real problem, of course, and this has been said already, conference, is Ofsted. It's Ofsted's accountability regime, and who wouldn't like, at the very least, to have that radically reformed, or even get rid of Ofsted altogether and have an organisation which works with teachers and schools to support better teaching and better lives for children and young people, rather than making their lives a misery. Now, it could be argued that 10 days discretion is not great, but actually parents are pushing at the margins already. The situation is that if we move to 10 days discretion, then some parents who don't necessarily have the excellent justification we've heard of, in some cases, would actually be pushing for that to become 20 days, and so on and so on. There may be evidence that says that a child being out of school during term time doesn't affect their performance, but there's also substantial evidence that exhausted head teachers and staff are not good either for school morale or for the young people they're bringing up. So there's evidence both ways. Schools need to be places of harmony for children to benefit. Now, I did have a number of other points to make, but I'd also like other speakers to have their opportunity. I agree with many of the things that you said, actually on both sides of the debate. But please, let's get Ofsted sorted out first before we do what is actually really just a bit of tinkering at the edges to pander to some extent to populism, notwithstanding the genuine good reasons for some pupils being out of school during term time. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I call Barbara Smith and ask Vicky Slade to stand by? Barbara is speaking against the motion.
At a recent Pizza and Politics, someone actually said they will be amazed if anybody spoke against the motion. Well, at least I'm relieved to find that I'm not the only one. Last October, the National Association of Head Teachers issued guidelines on term time absence, which were approved by Nicky Morgan. Remember her, Gove's gone. Examples of where leave could be given included religious observance, important family events, the needs of service families, and the duty to make adjustments for the needs of children with disabilities, some of the very things which the proposer of this motion highlighted. The motion notes that there's no correlation between decreased attainment and authorised family leave. Well, that's because teachers do their damnedest to ensure that children catch up. And what's the effect on the rest of the class while this is happening? Or, as we've heard from a burnt-out teacher, what's the effect on the teachers for having to do this? The NUT is calling for change, we hear, but it's its frontline members who cope with chickenpox in October, a norovirus in January, and who'll then have to cope with children disappearing on family holidays. The motion is concerned about the inequality compared with children in private education. If we want to worry about the inequalities with the private sector, let's worry about class sizes and facilities and access to sport and culture and arts. And let's worry that there are parents with so little faith in state education that they forego family holidays for years to educate their children privately. The motion is concerned about children on low incomes. Let's not kid ourselves. In the current society, the poorest families cannot afford a holiday. If you're getting basic meals from food banks, or the benefits cap is biting, then a week in Canvey Island caravan is beyond your wildest dreams. And a final point, two final points very quickly. The 6 weeks holiday is an anachronism. It was brought in when child labour was needed to bring in the harvest. If we are really serious about making change in education, let's look at restructuring the year and not just go down the route of looking about 2 weeks holiday. And finally, we heard a lot yesterday about refugees. Think of those refugee children, many unaccompanied, flogging their way through Eastern Europe or stuck in Calais. When asked what they want safety, security, and they want education. Please don't tell them that the most important thing for us is a week's holiday and not a week in the classroom. Thank you.
Can I call Vicky Slade and ask John Hemming to stand by?
Conference, I have a confession to make. When the current ban on term-time holidays was announced in July 2013, I was in Holland, taking my children out of school during term time. My Facebook page on that day was inundated with parents incredulous that their rights as parents were being undermined and fearful that they were suddenly going to become criminals. These are parents who do their best to live within the law, just living their lives. Now, I totally understand that this is a minor issue compared to all the huge problems in our education. I take nothing away from that. And I understand the concerns of teachers about persistent absence, but this is nothing compared to the disruption to learning caused by the absence of teachers. In the two-form primary where I'm a governor, in just 1.5 terms, there were 395 absences by staff. 295 on sickness, but 99 for other reasons. And I accept that persistently absent children do less well, and I am ashamed that the Conservative-led Poole Council, where I live, just up the road, has been in the bottom 5 education authorities in the last 2 years. But it's not caused by absence. That is just a smokescreen to all the other issues that we have. Previously, heads had the discretion to restrict approvals to children who had high attendance, were achieving the required levels, and would limit it to less sensitive times of the year. And all this motion calls for is a return to that discretion. As Liberal Democrats, we believe in reducing state involvement in our lives, and we believe in social mobility, and this ban undermines both of those values. In my children's school, the head expected children to continue learning whilst away. They had to write a diary and to sit down for a back-to-school interview. And this contract with parents recognised the dual responsibility, and it worked. Whether it was fossil hunting in Lyme Regis, exploring in the Lake District, or the excitement of a new language or culture, children learn everywhere. A planned approved holiday is far less disruptive than bouts of low-level sickness. What next? A ban on chicken pox because it affects our reception classes? I just want to say this is not a middle-class problem. This applies to all families, those at the margins of society keeping themselves going by their fingertips. A caravan holiday in Sanford, 10 miles down from here, puts its price up by 40%, £300 if you are outside to inside. That is not a middle-class problem. These are families who need a break from trying to eke out a living on the edges of our society. Those who can pay the fines will do, but why should they be criminalised? So, conference, do we believe in freedom and equality? Do parents and schools have the right to do what's right for them? Please support this motion and reverse these rules. Give the power and decision-making back to the schools, the governors and the families. After all, they know what's best for our children, not Whitehall. Thank you.
Can I now call John Hemming, who until May was my maverick MP for Yardley, Birmingham.
Well, thank you very much, Conference. Steve Webb said, this is a liberal proposal. The proposal is to trust parents to make the decision as to what's best for their children. And the evidence is that when this policy operated previously, it was right. It did not impact on children's education. It did not damage their situation. What's happened? Well, look up Kerry Capper. Kerry Capper was a single mother in Birmingham who was prosecuted for keeping her daughter off school because she was sick. And her daughter was sick. Yes, okay, the prosecution broke down, but it should never have got that far. And if we go through what people have said, Councillor Sharon Barnes said this impacts in rural areas. Hina Malik said this impacts on extended families. Saran Yusuf said it impacts on shift workers, and you can learn on holidays. Sal Jarvis, Councillor Sal Jarvis, who's an SEN coordinator, said it impacts on poorer parents, it's illiberal, and to say that you're not allowed to educate children on holiday, but you can educate them at home is a nonsense. those opposing it, Emily Stewart and Alan Sherwood, said there's a problem with Ofsted. Well, there is a problem with Ofsted. We all know there's a problem with Ofsted. There's another problem with Ofsted, that they're trying to force parents to send ill children to school to prove that they're ill, and that's going on as well. And the fact we haven't mentioned that in the motion doesn't mean it's not implicit in the motion, that we need to deal with Ofsted. It is inadequate. Barbara Smith raised concerns about the impact on teachers. Well, the NUT think this is the right way to go, and we're not saying education is unimportant. We're just saying let's have some common sense, let's have some discretion, and go back to what worked well a few years ago. There is no need to assume that those in Sanctuary House in the Department for Education know exactly what should be happening in every family in the country. We believe in treating people as individuals, and this motion talks about treating individual families as individuals and giving head teachers support and discretion and taking Ofsted off their back. Vicky Slade's point on this was that parents should not be criminalised. Well, it's absurd to criminalise parents for going to their great-grandfather's memorial service in America. That is absurd, but it happened. And we were very pleased to have support from Liberty in defending those parents, and in the end Essex County Council, who were prosecuting the Haymores, pulled back. But it shouldn't have happened. It is wrong. And I think essentially to argue for this motion, I'm going to quote from Councillor Sal Jarvis, who's an SEN coordinator, and what she said was criminalising parents for taking their children out of school is the wrong solution to a much bigger problem. Support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Before we take the vote, could I point out that we had 28 cards. We were only able to take 12 speakers. So apologies to everybody who put a card in that didn't have the opportunity of speaking. We'll now move to the vote on the motion in the agenda. If you want to vote on this, could you take a seat, please? Got to say all those in favour. All those against. One or two, well less than 10. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Can I thank my aide on the rostrum, Kaya Kushak, and Joanne Foster in the hall. And now it gives me pleasure to hand over to Joanne Foster. Thank you.